Ash fell softly upon the towers of Dragonstone, weaving through the night air like pale moths around guttering braziers. The island fortress breathed in its sleep, a beast of black stone and molten heart, its battlements bristling against a sky the color of old ire. Somewhere deep in those volcanic bowels, where rock ran slick with condensed steam and the odor of brimstone never wholly faded, a heartbeat not heard since the doom of Valyria answered the midnight bell that tolled from the tower of the sea dragon. A thin-lipped acolyte named Corlys crept along a hewn stair spiraling toward the lowest cavern. His lamp stuttered with each gust from vents that should have been sealed centuries ago. He carried, beneath his robe, the severed spur of a grown dragon, pure obsidian innervated with dull veins of copper. Every pulse of his frightened heart seemed to make those reddish rivers shimmer. He had stolen the spur from the carcass of Vermithor's latest kill, and the theft weighed as heavy as plate upon his conscience. Yet the task demanded no lesser offering. The blood of dragon to waken dragon. The scroll had insisted. He reached a landing before a basalt door carved with draconic eyes that glared from flame-licked sockets. Beyond lay the chamber of the First Forge, an abandoned shrine built when Aenar Targaryen first took possession of the island. Here, rumor held, Valyrian sorcerer princes shaped living flame into the eggs of Balerion and Vagar. No septon dared bless the place. No maester ever catalogued its lore. It was memory made stone, unbroken, unbent, unburnt. With a trembling hand, Corlys unlatched the door. Warm wind washed across his face, faintly sulfuric. He descended a final stair into a cavern so vast it swallowed the puny glow of his lamp. Fissures in the ceiling bled threads of dim moonlight. Pools of glassy water lay motionless between jagged stepping stones. And there, upon a slab of fused black rock, rested an iron corselet the color of dried blood, an open-faced helm, a two-handed greatsword etched with glyphs older than the faith. All that remained of Maegor the Cruel. The armor had been removed from his corpse the morn they found him impaled upon the Iron Throne. His bones were burned at a queasy dawn pyre beside the muddy way, and the maesters swore salt over the ashes so no necromancer might reclaim them. Yet the iron shell endured. Scoured, sanctified, then hidden away by Grand Maester Benefer's fearful order, Corlys set the dragon's spur upon the breastplate. It clicked once, then nestled as though fitted to a socket. Blood trickled from his wrist where the spur's edge bit him. He had meant only to place it, not feed it. But crimson drops pattered across the corselet and spread like ink in water. In the dark, the sword glyphs awakened, glowing ember red. A voice spoke from the shadows. "Do you ken what you do, child?" The acolyte whirled. An old woman leaned on a staff of petrified weirwood. Her eyes were milky, yet the lamp gleam traced a network of scars around the sockets, as though some ravenous fire had tried to eat them from her. She wore a mantle of dragon scales sewn in spirals. "Archon, I thought you were dead," she rasped. "Not before the work is finished." She nodded at the spilling blood. "It begins." Corlys backed away. "I obey the scroll. I've done my part. I want no more. Thou. None of us will have any part when the world kindles." She answered. "Only then will the Father of Flame decide whose flesh shall endure. Sit." He sank to his knees. The stone radiated warmth, as though some furnace breathed beneath. The old woman extended a crooked finger and stirred his blood atop the breastplate, smearing arterial patterns that resembled draconic wings. She muttered in High Valyrian, "Adruta Zaldridz's Issa. Blood is a dragon." The chamber shuddered. Far overhead, Dragonmon groaned in its stony sleep. A low, resonant boom, like a colossal lung exhaling, rolled through the pillars. One by one torches erupted along the walls, lighting of their own accord. Shadows danced. The sword upon the slab began to quake. Corlys tried to pray. All he could summon was the crooked half-remembered verse. Some old town novice had whispered to terrify him as a boy. "When the Black King wakes from molten bed, all crowns break and all oaths bled." A crack split the slab. Sulphurous steam burst forth. Metal groaned, warping about a vacuum of force that had no right to exist in the mortal realm. Someone drew breath. Not air, but power. The great sword rose. Slowly at first, then with hungry swiftness. It arced off the slab and hovered above the armor, edges wickering crimson light. Corlys clutched at his chest, heart hammering. The air tasted of lightning and bone hash. Half a league above, the night guards along the sea dragon tower felt the tremor before they heard the roar. Flames erupted from fissures that had lain dormant generations. A gout of molten rock arced into black heavens, painting clouds scarlet. Seagulls exploded mid-flight, scorched by sudden heat. On the bastion walk, Ser Balon Celtigar swore he saw a column of fire take the shape of a horned crown before the wind shredded it. Ravens leapt from their roosts and spiraled toward the dark heart of King's Landing, croaking warnings nobody understood. In the Red Keep, King Jaehaerys Targaryen, old now, weary and heavy-eyed, felt the throb in his dragon dreams, and knew instinctively it came from the seat his uncle once claimed in blood. "Maegor," he whispered, though none were present to hear. Across the narrow sea, the Triarchy ships blockading Stepstones glimpsed a distant glow blooming above Dragonstone's cliffs. Superstitious oarsmen crossed themselves against gods they never believed. The Lysene admiral swore he could taste copper on the wind, and ordered a cautious withdrawal out of cannon shot before dawn. In the chamber of the first forge, the old woman hummed a lullaby, older than old Valeria. The sword hovered like a lodestar. Piece by piece, disassembled armor drifted into the air. Gauntlets, greaves, gorget. They revolved, clattering faintly but guided by rhythm. The spur fused fully into the breast. Channels glowed with living light. Bloodlines, literally. Veins of ruby brightness. Corlys felt his consciousness pulled taut, as though the cavern drank his thoughts. Memories spilled unbidden. The smell of parchment, the ache of candlewatch nights, a brother whipping him for losing place during vespers. Everything he had been sluiced toward the awakening thing on the slab. Suddenly, the old woman clasped his head. "Remember this moment," she intoned. "All sins come due. Even the innocent must pay." She drove her staff against the stone. The sword dropped, point down, impaling the breastplate and the slab beneath in a thunderclap of raw polity. A circle of fire erupted outward, licking the cavern walls. Then came silence, but for the frantic thudding of Corlys' heart. Ash drifted. The glow subsided. The gauntlets and helm and greaves lay inert, but now the gaps between plates were filled by something blacker than the metal itself, as if shadows had taken corporeal form. No body within. Not yet. The old woman tested the edge of the sword with a fingertip. Blood beaded instantly. She smiled, revealing broken teeth. "His appetite remains." Corlys, shaking, managed a whisper. "Will he draw breath?" The reply came not from her but from everywhere, a whisper like 1,000 knives sliding from sheaths. "When dawn breaks upon the maiden's feast, the world will learn fear again." Corlys fainted. 3 nights later, a westerly gale drove whitecaps against Dragonstone. Fishing hamlets reported dead sea lions washed ashore. Eyes boiled in their sockets, hide flensed as though they had roasted in their own skins. The Septon who came to bless the carcasses fled when he beheld the sigil scorched into their bellies, a 3-headed dragon crowned in thorns. Within the castle, Lady Aeria Valerion, a ward of the king, awakened screaming. She claimed a one-eyed giant in iron carapace strode through the yard beneath her window, sword aflame, chanting her name. Maesters dosed her with milk of the poppy, but she scratched her arms raw until they bound her. Between sobs, she swore she heard dragon wings. Dragonstone's garrison searched every tower. They found nothing. That same hour, a mule in the stables birthed a foal with scales for skin. It lived long enough to whinny, then burst into embers. Maester Jonquil of the Red Keep recorded every omen with meticulous dread. His annals, penned on ragged vellum, began to use the Valyrian lunar calendar, as though the man unconsciously slipped into an older reckoning. He noted the pattern: 3 nights of quiet, then a manifestation. intervals like breaths. Inhale the dark, exhale the horror. Somewhere in the archipelago called Pentar Isle, ancient ruins long thought to be Giscari appeared ablaze at dusk, though no flame consumed the stone. Sailors swore they saw shadows of dragons bigger than any living specimen crawl inside the fiery veins. No heat, only light, and a smell of rich metal. Jaehaerys convened his small council behind sealed doors. Queen Alysanne urged dispatching a squadron of dragon riders to Dragonstone for reassurance. The Lord Commander advised caution. Their own dragons had grown restless, snapping at handlers and refusing harness. Only Vermithor remained sedate, brooding atop the dragon pit, like a cat round a broached nest. "I will go," said Prince Balon, always eager to prove worth. He patted his sword, Dark Sister, as though blade could stave off nightmare. But Septon Barth, scholar and skeptic, counseled patience. "There is scripture, your grace, untranslated prophecy, speaking of the black rebirth. If we intrude before its shape is known, we may only quicken it." Jaehaerys' voice cracked. "Would you have me sit idle while my uncle reaches from the grave?" "Maegor is ash," Barth insisted. "Ash cannot clutch a crown." Yet in his private diary, the Septon recorded a similar dream. A crown forged of bone and sorrow, descending upon his own brow, crushing until he woke choking. Storm's End, Tower of Thunder. Lord Boros Baratheon dined on thrushes stuffed with lemons, when the sky above his keep turned the hue of a bruise and thunder boomed without lightning. His dogs howled, torches guttered in reversed winds. Every echo inside that vast drum-round hall coalesced into a single word: kneel. The Storm Lord spat wine across the table. It sizzled as though falling onto hot griddle. Servants swore his breath, steamed in the chill. They found him an hour later on the parapet facing east, naked save breeches, arms flung wide, muttering an old oath of fealty sworn by Lord Orys Baratheon to his half-brother Aegon the Conqueror. Boros had never studied Valyrian, yet spoke it flawlessly. By dawn he remembered nothing, but the bruise-colored clouds lingered, swirling always toward Dragonstone. Under those same clouds, hidden in one of Dragonstone's lesser caves, Corlys woke restrained upon a stone dais. The old woman stood beside him, arranging candles molded of fat so dark they absorbed light. She recited lineage. Aenys begat Visenya, who forged Maegor. Discord begat Discord. Each verse she concluded by slicing shallowly across Corlys' chest, tracing invisible runes whose edges bled lapidary drops. Dragonglass flecks, within the blade, shimmered like captured dawns. Corlys tried to scream, but his voice was a whisper. The chamber stole all volume to feed the gathering thing beyond a door barred with plated iron and words of locking. Something scratched there, claws skittering along stone, impatient child of nightmare. "You shall be first meal," the witch said tenderly. "Every tyrant needs a herald, but every god needs a heart." She pried open his ribcage with jointed tongs fashioned from volcanic iron, yet Corlys felt a curious numbness. His fear bled out, leaving wonder. The witch lifted his living heart. It pulsed feebly, threads of life stretching between ventricle and body like silver teeth of a comb. Heart light spilled across her face, revealing that her eyes were not blind. The pupils were molten gold, swirling. "Behold," she intoned to the scratching door. "Flesh untainted by king's blood. Save a drop you marked yourself." With a creak, the door inched open. Darkness sauntered through, wearing the suggestion of a man. Armored plates floated around nothing, but within that shell, swirling smoke churned. Twin pinpricks of ember glowered where eyes might be. A gauntlet reached. Claws of rippled iron stroked the heart, testing its rhythm. Corlys died when Maegor the Cruel inhaled, and with that breath, drank soul and sinew alike. The embers behind the visor flared bright, bright as forgifiers of old Valyria. A low rumble issued from the helmet. First formless, then shaping into speech. "Blood for the Black King. Crowns for my cradle. Let them tremble." The iron feet took one step. The cavern floor fractured. Another. Stalactites shattered overhead. With each stride, flesh knitted beneath the armor. skin like basalt, veins glowing faint red. By the time Maegor emerged into moonlight outside the cave, he bore weight, not emptiness. Steam rose from his joints. Cliffs of Dragonmont witnessed the impossible. A storm of cinders burst skyward as a juvenile dragon, one of Bela's hatchlings, swooped overhead. The creature screeched, banked, and dared to spit pale flame upon the intruder. Maegor raised an armored hand. Fire bent around him like water around a stone. He seized the dragon by the throat, twisted. Bones cracked like kindling. The hatchling fell, neck limp, wings convulsing spasmodically. Maegor watched it writhe. His sword slid free of its scabbard with a mournful keening. One blow severed the hatchling's head. Hot ichor splashed across rocks. Maegor pressed his gauntlets into the pooling life and smeared sigils upon his helm, the dragon's own blood crowning him anew. From distant ramparts, outraged shouts echoed. Guards loosed quarrels that pinged harmlessly off his back. He turned, slow and inexorable. Where eyes should gleam hatred, they glimmered instead with cold appraisal, like a smith judging raw ore. He raised the sword in silent salute, point toward the red keep, invisible beyond hazed horizons. Then he spoke a single command, across miles, across ages, and every dragon chained in kings, landing rattled its bonds in answer. That night, King Jaehaerys dreamed of molten crowns. He sat alone at the base of the Iron Throne, blades twisting into serpents that hissed accusations. Somewhere above, a shadow heavier than any material presence crouched upon the throne, laughter dripping like oil. Jaehaerys tried to rise, but his feet fused to the step. Each serpentine blade whispered failure. Father of the realm, yet father of none who can save it. He craned his neck. The shadow resolved into a horned silhouette, sword across knees. The face behind the visor was his own, but older eyes red as wounded sun. He woke with blood in his mouth. A herald pounded the door. Kraken banners off Blackwater Bay. Dai Tiu. Stormwind rising. Dragonstone aflame. Morning poured thin light through pallid clouds. As Prince Balon saddled Vhagar's descendant Morgon, ignoring Septon counsel and queenly pleas. Scales clanged like hammered brass beneath the saddle as the huge beast shuddered. Morgon stank of smoke, eager for the sky. Balon shouted promises to return with answers, but his gaze glittered with reckless fire. He launched skyward, wings beating thunder from the air, and the king's court shrank beneath the downdraft. Septon Barth crossed himself. He rides toward storm, not through it. Queen Alysanne whispered, then may the seven light his path. Yet somewhere beneath the capital, in forgotten crypts where wildfire barrels slept like dreaming gods, a flame sparked spontaneously, green and hungry, though no torch had come near. Balon-crested clouds rimmed in red. From that high vantage, he saw Dragonstone, a smoldering ember in the sea. Vent plumes rose like columns holding up a broken firmament. Morgon roared. Challenge, defiance. Balon braced as the dragon folded wings, diving. Ash stung face and throat. Below, the courtyard within the stone drum churned with figures. Guards in disarray, stable hands screaming, dragons shrieking in pens. At the center of chaos stood the black-armored titan, sword resting point down like a scepter. Balon drew Dark Sister. Morgon hit ground with a shock that cracked flagstones, tail lashing. Balon dismounted in a spray of sparks. Maegor inclined his helm. Blood of my blood. Balon felt vertigo. The voice was thunder smothered in velvet. He dared not flinch. I am Prince of the Realm, sworn guardian of peace. Surrender and I may grant mercy. Mercy is for mothers, Maegor replied. And all I ever knew are dead. He stepped close. Dark Sister blurred, but the towering figure parried with mailed palm. Steel shrieked. Balon's arm throbbed from the impact. Morgon loosed flame that washed over both men and scattered beyond. Maegor walked through fire, cloak ablaze, but instead of burning the garment glowed like molten silk. One armored fist caught the prince's shoulder, lifted him bodily from the ground. Bones popped. Balon stabbed down, Dark Sister piercing the underarm gap. Dial. Blood hissed upon steel, but when he withdrew, the wound sealed with coiling smoke. A strange grief flickered across Maegor's ember eyes. "You fight like Aegon, die like Aenys." He flung Belon with such force, the prince shattered a parapet 30 paces distant. Morgan screamed, rushing to shield his rider, but Maegor's blade found soft joint behind jaw. With a savage heave, he opened the dragon's throat. Hot rain fell, blood boiling into steam where it struck glowing armor. Morgan spasmed, wings beating blind fury. The courtyard vanished in crimson mist. Maegor stood unmoved, arms spread, drinking the deluge as baptism. When vision cleared, Belon knelt amid rubble, chest heaving. Dark Sister snapped in half beside him. Maegor's voice gentled. "Brother's son, kneel." Forced or otherwise, Belon collapsed fully. Maegor set a hand upon his nephew's brow. Flame traced lines across skin, searing a sigil that glowed as 2 halves of Dark Sister cooled to ash. "Rise, anointed," said the Black King, "and lead my legions." Tears carved paths through soot on Belon's cheeks. He lifted his gaze, eyes mirrored the same ember hue. Maegor smiled. First true smile since waking, a horrible joy. That dawn, ravens bearing a single word. Vigilance departed Dragonstone in every direction. Their wings smoked, yet they did not burn. In the Vale, Lady Jane Eyre fainted as 50 such birds battered her moon door, demanding entry. At River Run, Lord Tully's prize hounds howled at the sky until their throats bled. In King's Landing, wildfire barrels beneath the city thrummed like kettle drums. Maesters felt it in their teeth. Vibration, appetite. Septon Barth rushed to the White Sword Tower where sworn brothers of the King's Guard sharpened blades in eerie synchronicity. White cloaks stained with ash none remembered acquiring. Atop the Iron Throne, Jaehaerys sat alone, hands trembling. He heard a footstep echo through empty hall and whispered, "Maegor." Across the slumbering deep, dragons awakened. Every clutch and every hidden rookery, eggs long deemed fossilized. Shells spidered with red cracks. When they burst, hatchlings emerged scalawet, eyes glowing ember bright. They screamed not hunger nor fear, but a name. Shrill and unified, carried by wind. Maegor. In Old Town, the Hightower's beacon, burning day and night to guide ships, flared black for the first time in recorded memory. The world, though it did not yet understand, had begun its long scream. And Maegor the Cruel, reborn in flesh of shadow and fire, gazed upon the rising sun. It seemed to him a crown of molten gold struggling to stay aloft. He raised his sword. The blade drank the light until dawn dulled to ember. 5 days, he told the trembling prince beside him, voice rolling like distant drums. In 5 days we ride for King's Landing. In 5 days I will sit my throne again. Belon bowed, not wholly a prince now, but something else, forged anew. 5 days, he echoed, the ash-etched sigil on his brow glowing red. Night slid once more across Dragonstone, carrying with it the whispers of dead kings and unborn dragons. Smoke curled heavenward. Some swore it formed the silhouette of a crown of swords. Others claimed it was the maw of an immense dragon devouring the moon. Only the Black King knew the shape truly, and he smiled, for the world was wide and full of crowns yet unbroken. K. Wind howled against the shattered parapets of the stone drum, threading through jagged rents as though the fortress itself were learning to breathe again. Ash clung to every crevice, feathering banners that once bore the 3-headed dragon in proud scarlet, but now drooped in a sullen gray. Atop the highest tower Maegor, the Cruel, stood bareheaded to the elements, black hair whipping about his iron-crowned helm, like serpents loosed from ancient coils. Dawn's first thin blade of light split the horizon. He drank it in as a conqueror might savor wine, the taste of promise and the iron tang of blood yet to spill. Behind him Belon, still in scorched mail, waited with the hollow patience of a man whose heartbeat had been retuned to another's drum. The sigil burned into his brow, glimmered with each pulse, tracing rivulets of dull crimson down the bridge of his nose. He had not slept since his anointing, nor eaten save the grisly dragon blood Maegor had forced upon him. Yet his eyes glowed with an unnatural lucidity. He watched seabirds spiral far below, and wondered whether they too felt the summons coursing through the world. Some hidden lie line of Draconic will now drawn taut between Dragonstone and every crown soon to be bowed. Maegor spoke without turning. "You hear it." "I hear," Balon replied, voice low. Words scraped his throat like new-forged blades. "The chorus grows." Maegor lifted a gauntleted hand as if conducting an orchestra no mortal ears could follow. "Each heart that quickens to dread, each egg that cracks, each fire stoked in fear. Every note threads into my song. The realm itself furnishes the melody. We need only set the tempo." "Nendero." He wheeled, eyes twin embers framed in soot. "How many banners can you raise among the Dragonstone garrison?" Balon's gaze flicked over the ruined yard where men still crawled among debris, hauling charred timbers, binding broken limbs, dragging the carcass of Morgon toward a pyre that would burn for days. 300 fit to fight within the hour. Twice that if we conscript the dockhands and fishers. The Valerian ships are anchored at Driftmark. Lord Corlys could rally another 1,000 though he would rather flay himself than kneel. Maegor's smile cut like a blade. "He will kneel soon enough, or I shall teach his bones to stand without him." Balon dipped his head, uncertain whether allegiance or terror bent his neck. In that moment he felt the ghost of another self, proud prince of a realm at peace, howling from a distant shore. But the howl faded beneath the thunder of Maegor's heartbeat echoing inside his skull. On the second night after Balon's turning, the fishing village of Sweetport Sound awoke to green fire blooming atop the water like sickly lilies. Children poured from hovels to watch tongues of wildfire dance across the bay in perfect circles, forming a 9-pointed star whose outer points lapped mere yards from shore. No spark leapt beyond the invisible boundary. When dawn came, the flames winked out as though never kindled, yet in the ash-drenched sand villagers found glass coins the size of an infant's palm. Each bore Maegor's crown dragon sigil on one face, and the words "Blood is Law" on the other. Those who dared pick them up swore the coins were still warm 12 hours later. The tale reached King's Landing before sunset, borne by traders whose sails stank of singed hemp. By then other reports poured in. In Crackclaw Point, the forests glimmered phosphorescent under a false moonlight. Foliage coated in thin films of congealed sap that caught flame at a whisper of flint. In the marches of the Reach, flocks of sheep birthed stillborn lambs with scaled muzzles and vestigial wings. Septons in Lannisport claimed crystals upon their altars, darkened overnight as if wine had seeped between facets. The realm muttered of curse and portent. Gold cloaks found graffiti on city walls. Maegor rises, kneel or burn, scratched in a language that none could read yet all understood. Within the Red Keep, Jaehaerys convened his small council, in the vast gloom of Maegor's holdfast, as though defying his uncle in the very stone named for him. Torches guttered, throwing shadows that shivered like chained specters. Septon Barth laid a stack of parchment upon the council table, each leaf covered in cramped script and sealed with red wax. "Ravens from every corner," he said, gesturing with ink-stained fingers. "Some corroborate the others, most contradict. All reek of fear." Lord Roger Baratheon, Hand of the King, slammed a fist. "Fear rises where the crown shows weakness. The people must see steel, not parchment. Let us ride at dawn with every dragon we can saddle." Across from him, Grand Maester Elisar shook his bald head. "Your plan would empty the capital of its greatest defense. Suppose Maegor's forces are but a decoy. Suppose the true strike falls elsewhere, in the streets beneath us while our skies are bare." "Menmasau, a decoy?" Roger barked. "The man is dead, come walking, forged of fire and nightmare. There will be no subtlety." "There may be worse," Barth murmured. He unfurled one parchment, revealing a charcoal sigil identical to the glass coins. The faith militant perceived these signs as the stranger's work, herald of apocalypse. High Septon has begun processions in the streets, calling for repentance. Already knives flash between those who would kneel to fear and those who cling to the Seven. "Mender Sor," Queen Alysanne gazed into the flicker of the nearest torch, seeing in its dance the silhouette of Balon kneeling before a monster of smoke and steel. The vision, the suspicion, had haunted her since the moment the prince's saddle emptied beyond the horizon. "Any word from my son?" she asked, voice fragile as spun glass. "None, your grace," Barth answered gently. The raven sent found no roost at Dragonstone. Each turned back, wings scorched, messages charred to ash. Silence cloaked the table. Even Lord Roger's bluster drained to grim quiet. Alysanne's hands trembled upon the wood, but her eyes hardened. "Then I shall saddle Silverwing," she declared. "If Balon will not send word, I'll fetch it myself." Jaehaerys rose, a frail pillar of worn majesty. "No. You are my light. I will not risk it. Better the realm lose a king than its queen." He touched her cheek, and in that small gesture, she saw the boy who once braved the Stormlands to woo her, not the weary monarch wrestling nightmares older than Westeros. Her resolve quaked, but before she could answer, horns blared. From the city wall, from the river gate, from every post where watchmen might raise alarm. A roar swept the keep. Dragon wings. The council rushed to balconies. Above the city, Morgan's corpse descended in ragged pieces, hauled beneath the talons of invisible cords, the strips of hide and sinew from its own gutted belly, twisted round charred bones to fashion crude harnesses. The dragon's severed head dangled down, jaws slack, eyes gouged by talons. Children screamed. Mothers clutched them into hovels. Morgan's remains crashed into the Blackwater rush, sending geysers of dirty water over the docks. On the beast's blackened ribs fluttered a banner. Strips of dragon skin sewn together, inked in dried blood. Words crimson against black. 5 days. The horn's lament did not cease before wildfire stores, under Flea Bottom, ignited. Emerald plumes soared skyward, a serpent of living jade. The blast buckled streets, flung wagons into walls, turned hovels to glowing charcoal. Flames leapt alley to alley, drinking refuse and flesh. Panicked cries became a single note of misery. In the keep, Alysanne felt the floor tremor, as though the city's bones cracked in sympathy. Septon Barth whispered a prayer for deliverance. Jaehaerys clenched the balcony rail until his knuckles bled. "My uncle counts," he said, voice hollow. "Each day a blow, each hour, a wheel's turn toward nightfall. How do you fight an omen?" Lord Roger's question carried no jest. "With steel," Jaehaerys answered, though steel had rarely frightened ghosts. He turned, cloak swirling. "Send riders up the King's Road. Summon every lord sworn to house Targaryen. Raise levies. I will not wait in this keep, like a bird in a gilded cage." Then, Grand Maester Elisar bowed. "And Balon?" Something like anguish flickered in the king's eyes, but he crushed it beneath duty. "My son is no longer mine." On Dragonstone, the air thickened with the smell of forge and rot. Maegor commanded the cavernous belly of the mountain, transformed into a smithy of horrors. Dragons born dead were flensed for scale. Living hatchlings too small to fly were bound in iron frames that forced unnatural posture, their fresh bones stretched as though on racks. Their wails echoed molten corridors, fueling the fever of men working bellows. Here Maegor introduced steel to bone and sorcery to sinew, forging greaves studded with dragon teeth, helms whose visors clasped living embers so the eyes forever glowed. Armorers, Valyrian smiths taken captive, Celtigar artisans pressed into bondage, labored until their arms hung numb, shaping suits for soldiers who would stride as living pyres. Balon walked among them with measured steps. Smoke curling from the wounds Maegor's sword had once kissed. He tested a breastplate sized for an adolescent dragon, nodding approval when sparks danced across its polished onyx surface. He paused beside a rack of spears whose black shafts pulsed faint red, as though blood circulated within. "What enchantment is this?" he asked the witch overseeing fabrication. She smiled, revealing gums burned to charcoal. Each is bound with vein splinters from Maegor's own skull, relics harvested after his first death. One prick to flesh and the victim's soul knows his name. Belon ran a thumb along the spear's edge. His skin split, blood welling up. Instead of pain, he tasted iron on his tongue. Sweet and vital. Vision blurred. He stood for a flicker beside an impossible throne forged of human bones. Maegor seated upon it, hair flowing like burning oil. Belon opened his eyes to the forge again. Heartbeat drumming faster. "Ready then," he said. Voice flint. Outside the mountain workshops, a black host drilled under crackling torches. These were no knights of gentle birth, but scab-knuckled killers drawn by the call that had spread through the nether gutters of every port. Gold beyond counting, women beyond measure, and the blessing of a king who feared no gods. Pirate captains from the stepstones. Sellsword detachments cast out by the Golden Company for cruelty, even bitter steel would not stomach. Dothraki exiles whose braids had been severed for cowardice, all found place beneath Maegor's banners. They called themselves the Ashen Guard, and painted their cheeks with soot mixed from dragon blood and burnt weirwood pulp, believing it warded them against any blade not tempered in volcanic flame. At the rear of their training field loomed the carcass of the dragon hatchling Maegor had slain. Its skin had been stripped and stretched across a wooden scaffold to dry in the sun. Children stolen from seaside hamlets peeled scales from the flesh, feeding them into braziers whose smoke turned dark red by dusk. Beside the flayed wings, candles of bloody fat burned low, releasing fumes that made eyes water and minds drift. On those fumes the soldiers dreamt of standing waist-deep in the streets of King's Landing, while bells toppled from towers into seas of fire. Midway through the third night, a storm marched over Blackwater Bay. Lightning forked across roiling clouds, turning the sea glassy black. Yet no rain followed. The clouds held their water like miserly bankers. On the city wall, gold cloaks sweated beneath boiled leather hoods, muttering about the stink of lightning, sharper than any sulfur they knew. Only when a rent tore the sky from horizon to zenith did they glimpse shapes riding the storm front. Dragons half-grown, their hides veined with brand-new crimson. They banked like hunting owls, wings beating thunder into the sea. But they did not assault the walls. They circled and shrieked before turning back toward Dragonstone, as though delivering a message too vast for mortal tongues. Below, King's Landing simmered in dread. The wildfire debris still glowed green in alley cracks, though kettles of sand had doused flame. The smell of charred flesh drifted on each breath of wind. Flea-bottom survivors choked on despair and smoke equally. Some said the stranger himself walked their streets, a tall man in burned black armor, whose visor mirrored flame and whose sword carved sigils into fallen timbers. Others whispered of pale children with scaled hands offering coins that warmed to the touch, and asking but one question: "Will you kneel when the king returns?" In the dragon pit, Vermithor roared himself hoarse, chains tearing bloody furrows in his neck. Dreamfire disgorged white-hot flame, scorching keepers who came within 10 yards. Syrax gnawed her own tail, till bone gleamed under ragged hide. The dragon sensed a master's dominion shifting. Slipping like tides beneath a new moon, only Sunfire, youngest of the pit, crouched silently, head low, eyes dim, as though mourning futures unseen. The master of the Dragon Keepers, Sir Valerian, brought word to Jaehaerys as the king examined blackened stones, where Morgan's banner had dangled above the docks. "They will not be saddled," the old knight confessed, wiping blood from his brow. "Whatever sorcery curdles them, it grows by the hour." Jaehaerys stared at the river where water lapped oily against the quay. "Then we fight without them." "Your grace?" Valerian knelt, brittle knees cracking. "We are Targaryen. Without dragons, we are but men." "Them?" "On that day when our ancestors came from Valyria, they too were men until dragons obeyed." Jaehaerys touched the pommel of Blackfire, a blade forged before Aegon's conquest, heavy with heritage. Perhaps men alone must restore what dragons forgot. 4 days remained, and Maegor's host swelled with each tide. Lord Corlys Valerian, enraged by seizure of his island's forges, sailed with a fleet of 7 war galleys in dead of night to reclaim Driftmark. Dawn revealed their charred hulls drifting upside down in the channel. Masts snapped like kindling. No survivor returned to recount the battle, yet watchers on Crackclaw Cliffs swore the sea itself churned with black shadows, and that fire of neither red nor green, but pitch dark, consumed wood and flesh alike. With Corliss's fleet scuttled, Blackwater Bay lay open. Maegor's smiths began assembling pontoon platforms, massive rafts ribbed with ship's bones, lashed by iron hoops, and sealed with pitch. Upon these they mounted scorpions sized for wyverns, ballistae whose steel arms glistened under lava-quenched oil. Their quarrels sported barbed heads of dragon glass coated in venom. Squeezed from dusk-veiled basilisks, soldiers rolled drums of wildfire, brewed thicker, deadlier than alchemists of the city had ever dared, to line the platforms. When winds allowed, these floating siege towers would drift beneath the city walls, immune to flames that could not leap water. Balon supervised assembly beneath the glow of Dragonmon's constant discharge. He spoke sparingly, but when he did, men obeyed with zeal, for rumor spread that his gaze alone could set dry straw alight. Once a drunken pirate mocked his scorched brow. Balon silently touched the man's temple, and steam hissed under skin until eyes burst like overripe berries. None mocked afterward. Maegor rarely spoke to his troops. His presence alone sufficed, massive, silent, a gravity that bent every will. Yet on the eve of the 4th day he entered the barracks where the Ashen Guard crammed shoulder to shoulder among cots fashioned of sailcloth. The torches guttered blue at his approach. Each soldier's breath misted, though air remained stifling. Maegor strode the central aisle, sword unsheathed, dragging its tip along the floor. Sparks leapt, tracing lines that smoldered after he passed. "You dream of plunder," he intoned, voice reverberating through ribs. "You dream of silver cups and pale flesh and songs of renown. But I grant more. I grant eternity." He stopped before a one-eyed Lysine cell-sail, whose scarred lips trembled. Maegor pressed thumb-pad to the man's chest. Heat rippled. The cell-sail's heartbeat grew audible. Loud, louder, until ribs cracked outward like shell of an egg. A column of flame roared from his mouth, devouring tongue and throat, but the man did not fall. He stood seized by divine rapture as his body charred yet kept shape. "Behold," Maegor said, stepping aside. The cell-sail turned hollow eyes on his comrades. Pupils glowed ember red. Smoke wafted from cracks in flesh, but sinews flexed. Muscles tightened. He bowed to the Black King. Maegor laid sword across the man's shoulders. "Rise as Cinder Knight, first of the Ember Legion." A sound like thunderous applause erupted, not from hands but from thousands of heartbeats quickening at once. Soldiers knelt, desperate for gift or curse, whichever might spare them from the ordinary death of men. That same night the Faith Militant marched upon the Red Keep. 7,000 barefoot penitents led the way, palms bleeding from scourges, chanting hymns that collided with screams rising from burnt alleys. Behind them walked 300 warriors' sons in glittering mail, swords bound with parchment bearing verses of judgment. They demanded audience with the king, claiming divine mandate to purge dragonseed corruption and vanquish the abomination on Dragonstone. Cerberus Hightower, captain of the city watch, met them at the Traitor's Gate with 500 gold cloaks. Words turned swiftly to steel. Torches guttered, moonlight danced on blades. The warriors' sons advanced, singing as they came. The gold cloaks braced shields. From the battlements crossbowmen sighted down quarreled shafts. An arrow of green flame flashed overhead. Wildfire, spent from a roof still smoldering, shattering on the cobbles between ranks. Vapor clouded upward. Screams broke as devout and guard alike writhed, skin sloughing in molten sheets. Chaos exploded. Battle cries, prayers, the gurgle of burning lungs. The gate's courtyard became a charnel pit. High Septon himself waded into the fray, his crystal crown flickering amid the smoke. "Stand firm! The 7 watch us!" he bellowed. Staff raised. A bolt took him through the throat, lodging crystal shards into flesh. He collapsed amid his flock. In that instant, something subtle snapped across the city. The thin veneer of shared faith. Huddled small folk saw their shepherd slain and turned on any who wore armor, blaming them for heaven's silence. By dawn, the cobbles outside the fish market canal lay slick with blood. The faith militant retreated, broken. King's Landing had devoured its would-be saviors. Septon Barth surveyed carnage from the Hans Tower balcony. Tears tracked lines down ash-painted cheeks. "We fracture under our own weight," he told the king. "Maegor need not swing his sword. The realm gouges itself." "Then call lords faster," Jaehaerys answered, voice brittle. "We must stand as one before he arrives. At what cost? We will bleed the common folk, dry to arm conscripts who'll break at the first roar of dragonfire." "Then, would you counsel surrender?" Barth closed eyes. "Ansel faith. Not in gods but in the wisdom we once prized. We need allies beyond swords. The Citadel, perhaps. Old Town's archmasters keep lore on Valyrian sorcery. Weapons we could turn against Maegor's necromancy. Weapons we could turn against Maegor's necromancy." "Send word," Jaehaerys agreed. "Offer them anything. Land, gold, titles. Only hurry." But ravens dispatched south never reached Old Town. Each turned again toward Dragonstone, sealed missives smoking within sodden pouches. Across the world in Braavos, a quiet corner of the House of Black and White stirred. Mirrors lined a chamber where assassins practiced faces. Among them stood a woman of indistinct age, hair streaked silver, eyes pale blue except when lamplight tilted just so and revealed flecks of red. News of Westeros rarely touched the many-colored temple, yet whispers of a resurrected tyrant unnerved even priests of death. Some said the god of many faces frowned when mortals trifled with the final veil. The woman, known here as the Kindly Night, listened to the sea against marble walls and hummed a lullaby older than summer in Valyria. That night she donned a new face, a rough-bearded sellsword from Volantis. She gathered a satchel of glass candles and a slender stiletto forged of dragon glass as white as milk. In the moonlight she boarded a swift cutter bound across the shivering sea. Her purpose was neither coin nor temple litany, but something deeper, an obligation whispered into the braids of her birth mother, long dead, who once served at Dragonstone and bore witness to atrocities no child's lullaby could cleanse. Westward she sailed, following the ash-bruised line where sea met sky, drawn by a harmony colder than any wind. 4 days gone. In King's Landing nerves frayed. Rumors blossomed like mushrooms in rot. Maegor's army numbered 20,050, 100. His dragons belched storms of black flame that swallowed keeps whole. He rode a shadow steed woven of smoke. He commanded specters stripped from crypts. Mothers clutched babies wailing under banners of soot. Men muttered that the king stored wildfire under every street and would rather drown the city in emerald hellfire than yield to his uncle. Merchants shuttered shops. Those with coin fled north or west, choking roads with wagons. The city gates jammed days at a time. Riots ignited when refugees spilled into gate districts, seeking bread that did not exist. In the keep, Jaehaerys labored without rest, drafting decrees, mustering militia, consulting alchemists for defenses that might repel sorcery. He ordered catapults built along the river wall, their payloads tipped with barrels of lamp oil and broken lances soaked in pitch. He commandeered bell towers as watch posts, renaming them Flammendancers after the goddess of dawn, hoping perhaps a change of name staved doom. But each raven that landed in the rookery arrived bearing one talon wreathed in ash and one message burned into fragile vellum. 4 days. 3 days. 2 days. Always the ink still warm, always the rune identical, the crowned dragon of Maegor. 1 day remained, and the drums began. Low thrumming through the wine-dark sea, vibrations felt in the bones of fishermen trailing nets near Blackwater Bay. From the battlements of the Red Keep watchers pressed palms to the stone, and felt it hum like a kettle left upon slow fire. In the dragon pit, the chains of Vermithor rattled to that rhythm until links snapped with a metallic wail. The bronze dragon surged upward, crashed through wooden lattice, soared into overcast sky trailing sparks from battered wing edges. He roared once, a sound of longing and despair combined. Then veered north toward unseen mountains, abandoning the city. The pit keepers gaped while dust rained down in steady curtains. Inside the throne room, J. Harry's heard the roar echo and spoke to the silence. One by one they forsake us. Alysanne sat upon the step below his feet, exhaustion hollowing her cheeks. They are creatures of instinct. They answer the stronger call. And what of men? J. Harry's asked. What call remains for them? Barth entered, cloak damp from night mist. I have deciphered a fragment, he announced, holding a slim book bound in flaking red leather. From the secret annals of Archmaester Valor, theorist on resurrection. He wrote of binding shadows to armor, using dragon blood as mortar. It claims such spirits can be undone only where they were forged. Then so, Dragonstone, Alysanne whispered. Specifically, the Cave of First Forge, Barth confirmed. Destroy the altar and the spell unravels. How? Jaehaerys demanded. Dragonstone is choke-full of Maegor's army by now. Not all must go, Barth replied. A small party, swift, through secret tide-to-pool tunnels. Poisons to slay the witch, explosives to shatter the forge. Roger scoffed. Fantastic tales. Even if true, you would condemn heroes to slaughter before they reach the mountain. Better a handful risk all than the realm burn. The king turned to his hand. Pick volunteers. Tonight. Roger's jaw clenched. I will lead them. No, Jaehaerys said. Your place is here if Dragonstone fails. Barth stepped forward. Send me your grace. I am frail, but knowledge weighs more than sinew in this task. Alysanne touched the Septon's sleeve. You speak truly, yet you are needed to counsel whomever survives tomorrow. Heads bowed, conceding stalemate. At last, Jaehaerys looked to a figure lingering near the door. Sir Ryam Redwine, captain of his own household guard, unflinching though his armor bore char marks from guarding the docks. Ryam? The knight knelt. Command me. Lead 12 men by moonset. Septon Barth will guide your ingress. Take wildfire pots, black powder, whatever demon's bile the alchemists can spare. If dawn finds you alive, light a beacon from the mountain's summit. He met Ryam's gaze. And if dawn finds you dead, may your ghosts guide our steel. Steel needs no ghosts, Ryam said, rising with quiet resolve. Only hearts willing. Night wore the crown of finality. Moonless, starless, a vault of coal. In that dark Sir Ryam's Drummond glided across black water. Lanterns shrouded. The dozen volunteers rowed in silence, blades dipping soundless. Barth sat near prow, clutching the ancient book, whispering coordinates. Here a submerged basalt pillar. There a cavern mouth masked by kelp. Waves slapped hull in a rhythmic hush. Far ahead Dragonstone loomed, silhouette faintly lit by constant volcanic ember. They slipped into the tunnel, scraping barnacled walls. Salt spray doused faces. At a certain recess, Barth signaled cease. They waded knee-deep onto a gravel bar and found iron rungs rusted into the wall, climbing into gloom. Upwards they clambered, boots slipping, hearts hammering rebel code against ribs. The tunnel spat them into a narrow corridor lined with obsidian sconces. No guards. Only echo of distant forge hammers and smell of blood-soaked coal. Ryam gestured. Split pairs, watch corners. They advanced, stepping over runnels of red-black sludge. The corridor opened into a high-domed cavern alive with orange flare. Below, hundreds of Ashen Guard hauled sledges stacked with wildfire casks toward shallow barges. A handful of Cinder Knights strode among them, bodies smoldering. At the cavern's center gaped the mouth into the deeper forge. Barth's finger traced rune ink inside his sleeve. Down into the heart he mouthed. They descended a flight carved into living rock. No sentinel blocked. Drums above masked clinks of mail. At corridor's end, they faced a door. The black basalt face carved with draconic eyes that glowed faint red. The book had warned. Spells of perception guard this threshold. Barth withdrew a phial of mirrored liquid. He smeared it across each volunteer's brow, muttering a Valyrian counterphrase. Eyes on the door dulled. Latch clicked open. The chamber of the first forge yawned before them. Flames danced across braziers shaped like coiled worms. The altar slab lay at its center, Maegor's original corselet, set now upon a spiderwork of silver threads pulsing with red light. Above it whirled motes of ash, shaped like hands clawing for purchase. The witch stood beside, staff in hand, humming the lullaby that Corlys once heard. The sound of mothers at miners' bedsides twisted into nightmare. She turned as they entered, her eyes gilded hellfire. "I've waited," she crooned. Ryam hurled the first jar. It burst against the staff, shattering glass, releasing humming beetles of green fire. She laughed. Flame curved back, snaking around her. Barth whispered the rune for unbinding and pressed a sigil-etched dagger into the burning circle. The fire writhed away, hissing. Knights broke formation, charging. One spear struck the witch's flank. The tip lodged but refused to pierce flesh. She caught another knight by helm and twisted. Bones shredded, body falling limp. Two more circled, slashing. Barth darted past, book held high. He reached the altar, scattering black powder across slab and silver threads. He slammed a wildfire jar onto the powder. It cracked but did not ignite. The witch shrieked, a sound like folding iron. She flung her staff, impaling Barth through the abdomen. He gasped, book falling, pages fluttering like broken wings. Ryam roared, driving sword point through her chest. At last, steel bit deep. Black ichor fountained. She clawed his gorget, ripping metal, but Ryam thrust further, pinning her to a pillar. Her eyes flared, then dimmed. The silver threads around the altar vibrated, light strobing erratic. Ryam yanked wildfire jar from broken mouth. Sparks licking fingers. He smashed jar into powder. Ignition blossomed emerald. Flames raced across runes, exploded up columns, kissed the ceiling. Cavern shook. Ryam seized Barth's book, drew the dying septon aside. Barth's blood smoked on lava-warm floor. "Destroy everything," he rasped. Ryam lifted him to shoulder. With free hand he scattered more powder to trailing flame. Pillars ruptured, stones spalling. Overhead a crack yawned, choking dust. Ryam staggered toward corridor, men retreating before quakes. Behind them, the altar crumbled. Maegor's corselet split as though invisible hands rended metal. A cone of red light speared from fracture, shot ceilingward, and vanished. On Dragonstone's summit Maegor stood in silent vigil, sword planted like root into cracked stone. He felt the altar rupture, a psychic blow lancing skull. Ember pupils flared bright white, then guttered. For the first time since resurrection, he exhaled a breath that misted on night air, and the mist coalesced into crimson flecks before disappearing. Baelon approached, helm under arm. "The forge. Breach," Maegor replied. Voice low thunder. "The trickster Barth, perhaps?" Baelon's lip curled. "Shall I descend?" "Slay them." Maegor's gaze fixed on horizon where King's Landing lamps gleamed. "No. Let them think victory earned. A spark to coax embers into flame. The time ripens." He turned from mountain edge. In the yard below, Ashengard mustered, barge captains lighting pitch torches, drums pounding cadence. Baelon followed, heart racing. Yet a fracture of doubt flickered within. If forge undone, what binds remain? Shadows and corners seemed deeper. The sigil on his brow throbbed painful. Maegor mounted a platform draped in dragon hide. He raised sword aloft. Drums silenced as if a single throat slit. His words carried without shout, borne on tides of sorcery. "Tomorrow," he said, "the shadow of fear will walk upright. Tomorrow the Iron Throne remembers whose name is carved upon its blades. Chain your doubts to the deep, for dawn brings fire that will not quench until the world kneels, and the kneeling place is grave enough." "Dam?" the host roared. Flamelit faces contorted in worship. Baelon alone heard the faintest tremor in Maegor's tone. not of fear or weakness, but of hunger unfulfilled. In King's Landing, dawn snuck pale over rooftops, ignorant of horrors waiting at threshold. Jehari stood on the battlements above the gate of the gods, dawnlight bathing Mael in pink haze. He raised spyglass. On the horizon shapes bobbed, rafts, barges, sails shredded into ragged pennants of black. Dragons circled high, silhouettes dwarfed by thunderheads rolling behind. He lowered glass and whispered to the queen beside him. Words no scribe set to parchment. Words only lovers share when future shrinks to moments. Forgive the sins I failed to see, the wounds I failed to heal. Alisand pressed slender fingers to his lips. We burn together or we rise together. Below, bells tolled, not in celebration, but alarm. Their iron throats cried across the city. Maegor comes. The sound sent tremors through stone, through bone, through history itself. No raven arrived that morning, no message of one day, for the day had come. And somewhere beyond the breakers, a single candle flared atop Dragonstone's summit. The beacon Ryam Redwine never meant to light, ignited by shrapnel of collapsing forge, casting a thin spear of white into dawn. For an instant, it revealed Maegor's features twisted with rage. The candle guttered, snuffed by unseen hand. Yet its brief flare told the king two truths. Hope still breathed, and so did the Black King. End of Part 2.